Oh, yes, they looked us up the V before they let us join the army, and it always surprises me that the regular people don't actually know about this. So it starts with good old George Bush, who in 1993 for Desert Storm wants to put women into combat in the air. I'm Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership, and the author of Uncultured, a book about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army, where I was Captain Mestenek and one of the first women on a deliberate ground combat team, but we're not there yet. Okay, so in 1993, George Bush wants to put women in combat in the air. And in order to do so, he offers to strengthen the rules against women in ground combat. Okay, so this is when the combat ban starts. And it basically says women cannot serve in combat units at a line level, which is was basically decided battalion and lower. Even in something like aviation for a while. Okay, so there's this combat ban, right? So women can't go into the infantry, armor, which is tanks, air defense artillery, which is shooting down the things that try to get us, and sometimes shooting down the aircraft, and then field artillery, which is call for fire. Okay, so also, because of this, now it is very, very important that we know who is a man and who is a woman. So all of these gender regulations get tightened. And one of the things they start doing at the military entrance processing facility is requiring us women to get completely nude, get up on a table, lie down, and let the doctor look. It's not a pelvic exam. They don't touch you. They just look so they can make sure that you are a woman. And here's the thing. It was so that they could then slot us in as second-class soldiers. And it's easily predictable, I think, at a leadership organizational level, that when you take a population whose job is to conduct violence on behalf of state, and then you tell them that this small group of 10% of you is not as good as you, it's predictable that that's going to end in violence. It just is. That's what humans do. We stack rank and then we unalive the ones at the bottom. So people will say it was a pelvic exam. They do the same things to men. They grab them, make them cough. No. But also, it's not the same. Because, yeah, they looked at the men's junk, but it wasn't to slot them in as lesser. And, it needed to be done. No, it didn't, because it's not done now. One of the things we proved, me and these 42 other women that finally got to go into what they called deliberate ground combat teams and go on patrols where we expected things to go boom instead of calling it, incidental combat like we did with Jessica Lynch and all of the other women who have served honorably in ground combat since the Revolutionary War. But then we proved that you didn't have to be a man to do good at war, which is the assumption. What else is interesting is when a group of people isn't capable of doing something, you don't have to put regulations and legislation to keep them out of it. There was no rules in my house that Mr. Knitting Cult Lady couldn't breastfeed the baby. It just didn't come up. So they put in all these rules to keep us out. And the thing is, they weren't scared that we'd get in and fail, right? They were scared that we would get in and succeed. And then they would have a Mulan situation, and that would be embarrassing. Oh, by the way, when they sent us 43 women into these deliberate ground combat teams, they didn't keep any records. It was just a quiet, secret experiment that I argue in my book Uncultured was intended to fail because they all believed their own pseudoscience and had been drinking their own Kool-Aid about what women were capable of. Anyway, signed copies attached here. And by the way, if that happened to you, you're allowed to be traumatized by it. It was gross. Oh, and by the way, because it's maybe unclear, the combat ban was always idiotic because there's no front lines in modern day combat.